All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the program, The Printed Matter of Black Arts Writing, Archives for the Future. My name is Randy Evans, and I'm the Associate Curator of Programs here at the Henry. I'd like to open our time together by sharing the Henry's land acknowledgement. We at the Henry Art Gallery live and work on the unceded ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples and the shared waters of all tribes and bands, named and unnamed, including Suquamish, Duwamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. The land acknowledgement reminds us of our connections, indebtedness, and responsibilities to the peoples and the more than human kin where we live and work. We invite you to join us in paying respects to elders past, present, and future, and to consider what paying those respects means within the work that we do as individuals and within institutional frameworks. Tonight's program is presented in collaboration with the Black Embodiments Studio, whose work champions and cultivates art criticism and writing by and about Black artists. This evening's focus on the care and dissemination of printed and material ephemera has many resonances throughout the Henry's current exhibitions, in particular the work of Camila Janan Rashid, whose practice is deeply vested in the use, manipulation, and de-hierarchization of archival and found texts, images, and video. If you haven't seen the exhibition yet, I would encourage you to do so before it closes on April 26. In addition, this program is part of a new series at the Henry, Public Scholarship and Practice, Black Futures and Archives, which highlights University of Washington-led research and practice at the intersections of visual art and culture. I invite you to join us for the next iteration on Thursday, May 14th for the program Black Digital Humanities, State of the Field. You can find more information on our website. I would also like to extend a big thank you to Kemi Adeyemi, Associate Professor of Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies and founder and director of the Black Embodiments Studio. We appreciate Dr. Adeyemi's partnership and are honored to be one of the partners for this year's convening. Before we get started, a few notes. Each speaker will present for about 6 minutes. This will be followed by a moderated discussion with Kemi, the audience Q&A. Live AI captioning is provided on the screen, and you can find assisted listening devices on the table outside if you'd like to use them. Thank you again for being here, and I will now turn it over to Kemi, who will introduce tonight's guests.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here. Definitely want to give thanks to the Henry Art Gallery, who's a longtime collaborator with the Black Embodiments Studio, which actually started here at the University of Washington a lifetime ago. We're no longer in the university, but it's great to be able to come back, and thank you to Randy and Tanya in particular for making this room happen tonight. We are all here, and I'll do some brief intros. The folks on the stage and folks in the audience are here as part of a 2-day convening, which is primarily rooted in closed-door sessions of archivists, artists, reference librarians, arts educators, creative thinkers, doers, makers, community-rooted people who are thinking very carefully and thinking very closely with printed matter, materials that will degrade, against all odds. All of our interventions, they'll yellow, they'll tear, they'll fall apart, they might get lost, they may never have been encountered in the first place. And I wanted to bring these people together from around the world to have a conversation with one another. A lot of us are doing sort of similar work or overlapping work, and we're really rooted and embedded in community, but we might not actually be able to interface with one another with any sort of considerable depth. So we're all in the room tonight because we're in the room together for 2 days. While there are 4 people of the larger group of 16 who are in the room, it is a sort of random assortment of people. There are people in the audience that we will be in conversation with directly and indirectly who have their own projects and their own creative endeavors that the conversation that we're having today is indistinguishable from those practices that are happening in the audience. And strangers, in the room maybe there's a lot of people focused on printed matter in the room, and I guess we're all here because we're interested in it. So just a lot of gratitude to everybody involved. I'm gonna skip the deep bio and sort of briefly introduce everybody by name and by one of the sort of main projects that brings them together in the room. Each person is very casually going to introduce us to their work, spending 5-6 minutes each, and then I'm gonna kind of bring us into conversation and then bring us all into conversation. First, we have Holly A. Smith, who is the archivist at Spelman College. Amari Gibson, who runs the Reading Room in Houston, Texas. Yusuf Hassan, who runs Black Mass Publishing in New York/Connecticut. Candace Williams, who runs Cassandra Press, which is worldwide. So maybe, Holly, we'll start with you. If you could just tell us about your work as an archivist at Spelman. And I'd really love to hear you sort of frame it from jump within your framework of what a Black feminist archivist tradition is and what it can look like.
Hello? Okay. Again, profound gratitude to Kimmy, Lauren, Jessica, and all the collaborators at the university and the community for this opportunity to be here. Thank you so much. Yeah, my name is Holly Smith. I have the pleasure of serving as the main steward at Spelman. I like to say the main steward because, again, as we kind of continue to have these conversations around collaboration and memory work, I think we can all be united in this work together. And so it's a really unique situation at Spelman College, where I am in the archives. So we are the official repository for the college, Spelman, one of two remaining historically Black colleges founded to educate women of the African diaspora, Bennett College in Greensboro being the second one. But we've been in continuous operation for 145 years. So amen this year. Yeah, give it up, because thank you, my sister. So we are the official repository for the college, documenting from the founding to the present, faculty, students, staff, photographs, papers, a variety of things. But we have a really unique situation in that Spelman's archives are a component of the Women's Research and Research Center at Spelman, which houses a comparative women's studies program and founded by iconic Black feminist scholar and theorist Beverly Guy Sheftall. And woo, I know, give it up for BGS. I'm laughing because it took me a long time to call her Beverly. She is formidable, but she's one of the most giving, and she's not warm and fuzzy in a traditional sense, but she's one of the most loving and compassionate people. And she has a real desire, I think, of connection and connectivity to students and community. So because of that idea, she wanted to keep the archives at Spelman rather than having them go to the consortial library, AUC Woodruff. But she also wanted to build up research collections by and about Black women and Black people. So we have a unique situation in that essentially our current iteration in our physical space was founded by a Black feminist. And really the building of the collections, our special collections, and even I would say the institutional collections undergird what I really call, and others have also named, other brilliant scholars, Black feminist archival practice. And by that I mean we do have collections and records of iconic Black feminists, two of which are Toni Cade Bambara and Audre Lorde, who I know there's some images circulating around, and I selected two of my favorite pieces as a way that really undergirds practice. There's Sister Toni, I think in her 20s, and there's a draft poem from her novel, Those Bones Are Not My Child, that says, and if you're familiar with that, that's a story about the Atlanta missing and murdered children, and that draft poem says, "We are the light, we are," oh goodness, can't read too good. "We are the light, we are robbed of," forgive me, I can't see that too clearly, but the paraphrase, "We are the light, we are robbed of when each one of us is lost." And I just think about that in terms of what is lost when we don't do this together. And there's Sister Audre actually at Spelman in 1988, and she has a poem she wrote to Toni Cade Bambara after The Black Woman was published in 1970, congratulating her, but also praising her raising, they had daughters in similar age, and she says to raise a correct little sister. And it reminds me of Toni Cade Bambara saying in the new documentary, if you haven't seen the documentary by Louis Massin, the TCB School of Organizing, please see it when you can. And Sister Toni said, to sister is a verb. So what does it mean to sister, to sibling, to brother, to take care of each other. And I think, again, just looking at the way they were empowered to tell the stories of their communities as Black feminists in the face of, like we were talking about earlier, racial co-optation, violence, everything from benign neglect to intentional destruction of records and history. But they were also very specific in using their written, published, and unpublished works to dismantle systems of oppression like patriarchy, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, racism. And I think that's because their collections came because of relationships with other Black women in a radical Black feminist space with radical Black feminist thinkers like Dr. Johnetta B. Cole and Dr. Guy Sheftall. There's the undergirding of care of the physical papers, of celebration of the work of Black feminists and others, but repair and to undo the damage, or not undo the damage, but to cause accountability to the damage and how we don't perpetuate that continued harm in the work we do. And like we kind of talked about earlier, that means when we are doing and working in collaboration rather than co-optation with communities, that we're getting beyond the walls of Spelman and academia to work with activist organizers. My colleagues here, I'm excited about being here and connecting so we can think of ways that our work can complement each other so we can keep these conversations going. Again, to not gatekeep, but to lend expertise, talent, to be self-aware, to understand how our identities show up, and to paraphrase Sister Audrey, to understand it's not our differences that divide us, it's our inability to celebrate, recognize, and accept those differences and see them as strengths rather as points of danger or destruction. So was that might have been longer than 5 minutes, but that is.
I think you were right then, just clicked
you.
over to 5 minutes.
Perfect, because again, as you know, I said earlier, I'm a yapper, but in all seriousness, I'm just really excited to be in conversation with my wonderful colleagues and comrades and all of you today and have these wonderful conversations, so thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So Amari, you started the reading room in Houston, Texas. Introduce us to the reading room, and if I can put words into your mouth, can you maybe frame why you created the reading room as a kind of space of public engagement with Black art books, and not maybe an exclusively private collection that you had already been cultivating?
Wow, look at this audience. Hi, y'all. Are we in the room? Are y'all feeling good? Woo! I'm glad. Kemi, thank you for inviting me. Where my people at? Where my people at? Y'all hear me? My name is Amari Gibson. I'm from Houston, and I founded the reading room because I needed somewhere to go. I wanted to be surrounded by Black art books. I needed to get out of my living room. I wanted to have a place where people could gather. I wanted somewhere cool for my friends to come when they came to visit me, because everybody's afraid of Texas for whatever reason. And I had been cultivating the collection as a way to keep the evidence of our creative genius, Black creative genius. My background is in art history and sociology. I worked in museums for a number of years, and I had so many questions going in. Where are the Black people? I realized in the curatorial profession, because I was really interested in collections, if no one is there to steward the work to come out of storage, no one's gonna see it. And the books were, as I said, the evidence, but also the material through which you could learn. If you didn't want to pay $25 to go to the institution to see the show, you can crack open the book. Or if you couldn't get on the flight to go see the show in whatever city it's on in, you could buy the book. If you can't buy the work, get the print. If you can't get the print, get the book. If you can't get the book, get the postcard. And so I started the reading room in 2023. I didn't have a physical space initially, so I made a website and I scanned the front and back covers of the 325 books that I had at the time. A library seemed natural because I'm not a commerce girly, so I didn't want to do a bookstore. That's not my lane. It's not my ministry. We did a 2-day pop-up a month after launching the website, where I brought, I think, about 150 books to kind of test and see how useful this would actually be. I knew that it was something that I wanted to share. Studying art history and learning about the world through art has really opened up everything. It's changed the way that I see the world, the way that I see myself, and I had to go to college to kind of get that access. And so thinking about meeting people where they are, I brought the books into the space. Folks showed up. They spent 2 days in the space thumbing through the collection, and we did a program. The second day was a film screening, and someone came in that second day and said, I didn't even know this many books on Black art existed. That was the affirmation for me that, one, the collection needed to continue to grow, but that this work actually is gonna make a difference, especially in Texas where everything is so repressed, educationally, culturally, but Black people continue to thrive. And so this is like a sort of proof of concept. So we continue to do pop-ups for about a year or so, and then I moved into the space that I'm in now, Sandman Studios. I've been there for about 2 years, and it's been wonderful. We do free public programs, listening sessions, film screenings, workshops, teach-ins. I'm glad that that quote popped up, libraries are the university of the people. I think if there's anything that could describe what I do, I think it's that. Yeah, I hope that's clear.
It's clear. We'll get into more details too, yeah. Yusuf, Black Mass Publishing, introduce us to the project. And one thing that you said we had a session together already, and so just to frame a little bit, I really experienced your introduction into your archive, where I hear you as sort of really using the zine form as a way of you processing Black art forms of multiple genres, and then really gifting that to other people in the format of a beautifully crafted zine. So introduce us to Black Mass Publishing, and it would be great if you could talk a little bit about what it means to collect your own ideas for other people to experience.
Absolutely, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this evening with you all, to be in conversation, to speak about our practice, the work that we're doing collectively and individually. Is an honor. Black Mass Publishing was founded in 2019, but I've been working in publishing, self-publishing, before 2019. But to speak particularly about Black Mass and the ideas that I was thinking about when I debuted the press, I really wanted to, it started out truthfully as a research for myself, and one of the foundational ideas behind it was that I did not like the way that the institutions cataloged materials, and it was somewhat of a barrier for me. So what I would do was, when I would research things, I would scan them and I would make them into zines and I would bring them home. And I would research and process the information in that format because it felt more realistic, it felt more vulnerable. It also didn't create a barrier between me and the information that I was engaging with at that particular time. And I would maybe print maybe 2 or 3 and I would pass them out. Maybe I would give them to friends that were interested in some of the things that I was researching at the time, and they would pass them off. And it created this community behind it, which what zines were really made to do is made to be disseminated through communities and go from hand to hand processing and dealing with information. One of the things that I intentionally did was a lot of the zines that I made were always in short durations, usually 4 pages or 8 pages, sometimes even 1. And it was really a way for when they were passed off for the person that is the consumer to then take the information that they are processing and go and further the research themselves. And it was very liberating for me because there were lots of things that were processed out of that, how that information was facilitated. I remember there was a student from Oxford University, actually, a young lady by the name of Mathilde, who had did her thesis on Black Mass from actually a zine that she encountered, and then she decided to do her whole thesis actually, on Black Mass. And when she had asked to do her thesis on Black Mass, I was a little hesitant because I felt like the practice was still so young, and I thought that a thesis on a practice that's still moving in real time, during that time I felt like it would somewhat dated a bit. But the way that Mathilde presented her thesis and she framed the thesis, I felt like it left enough questions open without leading to any conclusions, and it felt very realistic to me. It was at that time that I started to understand that although I print in very short durations and that I print very limited amounts, but not for the sake of it being limited, but because of my mind moving from one subject matter to the next, that the work somehow still expanded far reach. Even though the quantity was very, very small, the quality of the work was expansive, and it went for a great deal. And the work has been disseminated across so many different spaces among so many different communities. And another foundational principle to Black Mass Publishing is that the work is rooted in collaboration. So collaboration cannot be separated from myself and the work. There's so many different parts to Black Mass and so many different people who have contributed to Black Mass and continue to contribute to Black Mass. The first publication that was produced by Black Mass was 13 artists, all friends, who contribute different works to this publication. It was called Project Black Mass, and it was a bunch of research material that they contribute. It compiled to 373 pages when it was all said and done, spiral bound, and it touched on so many different things, whether it's music, literature, art, poetry, just thinking about Black spirituality, medicine, music, community, even thinking about how in the Black Panther newspapers, they had a dietary section to where they were thinking about food and nourishment of the community, which was also very important. It's always important, but particularly at that time, being fed in the community by Black people and making sure you were being fed the correct food was also a way to think about fighting oppression, because when you eat well, you feel better. And sometimes I don't eat the best, but when you eat well, you feel good. And this document, I like to call it a document, it touched on so many different matters, and Black Mass is still moving in space. I'm thinking about the practice. I've always thought of the practice as a research. And one thing that I've been saying for a very long time is that Black Mass don't necessarily belong to me no more. It never did. It belonged to all of the people that contribute to it and continue to contribute to this process. Community is a huge part of how I'm thinking about the practice and how the work is being disseminated. And in closing, one of the things that I've continued to do and try to put as much as emphasis on doing is making sure that I am creating material that is tangible, but not only just tangible, but that is accessible. In October of last year, I spent a month at teaching at UCLA. And during this month-long teaching residency, I was able to develop a 30-volume set, a 30-edition set of a box set called Radical Publishing, which the main goal was to have these box sets distribute to community-based libraries that prioritized accessibility. So it was not going to be donated to institutions because there's a barrier there. So we sent these box sets to individuals and to community-based libraries that we felt had the level of accessibility that people can come off of the street and use this material without signing a log or having academic critics to review this information, especially thinking about the history of zines, thinking about the history of this material, thinking about the Black Panther newspapers, thinking about all this information and how this information was accessible. And I don't get everything right, and I'm always thinking about accessibility with the work, and it's complicated sometimes. Even when the institutions start to collect the work, it gets very cloudy. And I try my hardest and my best to make sure that the information that is in circulation, that I'm producing, is as accessible as possible. That it keeps going, and I'm pretty sure that Black Mass will precede me, and it will be here after me, and it will be passed on from hand to hand to hand. I'll say this lastly, seriously, that I have a son, he's 4, and I make an effort to always bring him when I'm printing, when I'm shipping, when I'm making, when I'm stapling and stamping. I still hand stamp, and then, sometimes I'll let him stamp it too, because, implanting that foundation it goes for a long way. So I want to make sure that it's there and that's embedded. So I'll leave it here, and thank you all again for allowing me to share about the press.
Candace Williams, Cassandra Press, tell us about it.
Some notes. No. Yeah, I'm also so grateful to be with all of you, kindred spirits like minds. I live in Germany, which feels like very much an outpost of the diaspora, but also not some. But yeah, differently. So it's really nice to be in community. I don't get to be so surrounded so often, and that's felt lovely already. Just got to it today. I think I just wrote down some things. I was just kind of scattered. I don't really feel like doing a whole timeline. I've been running this press since 2016. I started it in 2014 with some fools who couldn't hang. Kept it going as a really Black operation till 2016. I'm now completely burnt out. Really have been trying to stop it for a couple years now. And in thinking about how I can't stop, I think this has been such a lovely, hearing so many people's impetuses and so many people's motivations, what they'll inherit, what they'll pass on, has been really good. I think 3 things about Cassandra is the first thing is I got to do a show around whiteness as property, which is a Cheryl Harris essay from the 90s that I think I've been really has been flashing in my mind a lot lately. But thinking about one of the tenets of whiteness as property, which is the ultimate right to exclude. I feel like, Cassandra has always dealt with, and Cassandra has been personally my kink around literacy. I think the word accessibility keeps coming up, and whether it's financial or intellectual or material accessibility, and that I think is kind of the first point around Black printed matter. What is printed matter? What is Black printed matter? If whiteness is property, right? If reputation as whiteness is property, if these kinds of literacies we were excluded from, especially the literacy to incorporate and franchise, self-regulate, grow intergenerational wealth, et cetera, not be property, was really withheld from us. Then what is Black printed matter? And I think it's just always kind of in many ways expectedly entangled in what it means to be both exploited and to repair. And so Black printed matter often, I feel has this place and space and time where it's the privacy. It's a place where there's personal privacy. It's been, important to our keeping and holding on to personal privacy, but it's also a lot of space where oppressive policy lives. And it's how oppressive policy is really ordered, maintained, passed down, and especially in image culture, I think a lot about Black printed matter and the dual kind of definitions of it, right? Where it is also the minstrel cartoon, right? It is also so many images of pornographic, fetishistic, degrading images that have been circulated so far beyond us, right? They have nothing to do with Black personhood or with personhood at all. Like, and so in that way, Blackness has been so tied to printed matter. And it is a trap. It's such a trap for us as well. And I think there's, a kind of second point with Cassandra. So that was maybe like, let's say, years 1 through 4, we're really figuring that out with this press. I think, maybe years like 5 through 7 have been this idea of press work and what press work is, especially the pandemic brought this up. The press work is not very different from all forms of abolition and suffrage. I feel like in many ways the press, as we understand it contemporarily, is a product of Black resistance, especially Afro-American resistance, from the Frederick Douglass printing, North Star, all the way down to Reading Room and Black Mass, and so the urgency that creates Black printed matter as ephemera, especially when we regulate it, when we own it, when we disseminate it. That kind of fugitivity, that kind of disposability, indisposability, destroyability, deniability, all these things become, like, I think, really important to how we understand the instances of racism, whether they be like the second of a reflex of racism or the deep entrenchment of racism into social policies, social scripts, sexual being. And so I think the press work becomes media as a meditation, I think, on all of those forms of exclusionary violence, but then all of those communications and languages and layers. So yeah, we started doing classrooms in 2020. A lot of the works that went from kind of like slinging text, I used to call it slinging text, but going behind paywalls, bringing stuff out of JSTOR, making them affordable for Black audiences, but then the necessity again of then the intellectual part of that accessibility, the financial part, taking care of the intellectual part of it, the material part of it was so much more about building discourse and giving space and time to these discussions, to animate these moments of text, these ephemeras, the writers' lives being so much more important sometimes than the text, right? Because most, especially young Black students, in their literacies, our works are taken from us before we can have them, right? So like seeing these works that are produced behind pedagogical paywalls, intellectual paywalls, even kind of like emotional and cognitive dissonances in our communities that don't allow us then to the curiosity or the time or the space to really even enjoy each other's work, reap the rewards of each other's research, change policy together. So the last couple years, I think, have really been thinking about not just press work, not just Black printed matter, not just press work, but the idea of Black feminine leadership in press work. And important is, especially in what you're saying, is that we not only hold space, but we hold memory, we index, we cross-reference. Because Black studies is a part of so many other forms of study, when you let Black women lead space and Black femmes lead space and those Black experience lead space, there's an additional kind of time that's never ready. Like we're never ready for that time. We're never able to spend that time, but we have to. There's an ethical limit and an impossibility in the Black femme run press. I feel like I'm saying it because I'm also, the burnout is real, right? It's like top to bottom. But those impossibilities and those those ethical lanes or something, or those needs to maneuver, to hide, to manifest, to pray, to wither, to be constantly and beyond and in excess of evisceration, while still knowing that you have, the womb work, that you still have the emotional care, that you still have the archive, the library, that you're still holding on to grandma's photos, that you're still, that you're still in the garden, that you still are a mother, whether you're on the dance floor, whether you're a mother, like there's so much of that. So that kind of impossibility of an ethical stance, while kind of being like so, again, a kind of logic that's always interrupted in white supremacy by this kind of Black-led femme work. I think it just produces all these stranger logics, maybe unspeakable or unnameable, but still extremely practical and extremely embodiable. So I think that's where it is with Cassandra now. I'm trying to re-embody it, or reimagine it in body, let's say. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions that I'll pose to you all, and I'll sort of target, the question just to sort of keep conversation going. But in a few minutes, I will invite you to offer questions, so start formulating now. Just giving people the room a heads up, because I hate the dead space when it's time for the Q&A, and this is your runway. I really loved the phrase that you offered us, Candace, the ways that our projects are allowing opportunities for people to reap the rewards of one another's research. We've been thinking a lot about printed matter, but so much of the work that you're all doing is really about bringing people into the project to give people points of connection with those materials. And I haven't necessarily myself thought about the power of allowing people to sit in a room and just spend a couple of hours reading in community with other people reading. So I would love to sort of pose the question, and I'll ask you, Amari, to answer first, about how your project, the reading room in particular, but also all of our projects, how you orient to the project as an ethical commitment and as a political project that's, of course, anchored in printed matter, but the printed matter is, I think, I'm curious about how that is providing you an access point to think about ethics and politics and justice.
Well, first of all, for Black folks, reading is political. We spent centuries not being able to read, not being able to educate ourselves. So I think this project and what I'm hearing about archives and independent spaces is that it's a form of re-education, self-education. So that's number one. Two, the library programs are all free, period. Everything that we do is free. And every program that we do is anchored by a book in the collection or prompted by a book in the collection. So no matter what we do, there's always a reading list. I think being able to maintain the spirit and the ethic of the sort of radical politic is because I'm funding it with my own money, so no one can really tell me what to do. That leading with the language of independent reference library is important to me, so that if I'm ever in community or in relationship with somebody who wants to support, they understand that there's a politic behind this that they're signing up to support in some ways. And I think as I've gotten older, I'm doing everything I can. I finished my solar return, Saturn return. So I'm trying to make sure that my beliefs and my actions are always in right step. And yeah, I'm overly committed to making sure that I can find ways to meet people where they are, even if they can't travel to the space, right? How can I open up access for them? Yeah.
Maybe Holly, if you could sort of answer from the space that you're cultivating, which is, the word independent is a little tricky. There's multiple layers to that word of, you also sort of working as an independent reference librarian. So can you talk about the work that you do within the context of Spelman as having a sort of ethical drive or a political impetus?
Absolutely. And so being at an institution, we know, can have its own challenges and parameters. I will say one of the many blessings, I think, about being at Spelman is being in a space created and crafted and centered by a Black radical feminist and surrounded in that way, where there is already an eye and care toward community and dismantling systems of oppression. And in all honesty, too, Dr. Guy Sheftall jokingly calls herself a non-boss, but what she means by that is she gives a lot of leeway. So I thankfully have a lot of autonomy and don't feel a lot of pressure of conformity of performance. I'm grateful for her trust, but that we feel similar ways. Most importantly, like you said, thinking about, so first thing when I think about the ethical considerations, I think of accessibility. I know there are some, institutions, archives, repositories, or reading rooms where you do need letters of introduction, where you do need certain credentials to come in. All you need to come into the Spelman Archives is curiosity. We do ask for an appointment only because we are a small but mighty team of 2 people, and the reading room only serves 4 people. So, we do ask that you contact us to make an appointment, so to make sure you can get in, but we don't want to create barriers. And so I like to tell people that I don't think sometimes in our profession there is this eye and care toward really centering community, or even caring or breaking down barriers to understand, or having conversations about, well, this is what an archive is. This is why we might ask people to not have food or drink around items, and to make sure they know I do the same thing too for the long-term preservation. So I think there's the ethical consideration of accessibility, care, explanation, and I think, and I'm sorry, I think the impetus is that our role in helping, collaborating to craft societal memory by what you choose to take, you don't take. I mean, a collection development policy is a political statement, because you are being able to determine what you're able to accommodate and what you're not. And there's this fallacy, I think, that we are trained in professionally, that archivists are somehow neutral keepers, passive and neutral keepers of dead records, meaning that the records, we're just keeping them. They don't have, memory. They still can't elicit pain or joy or context, where I see us as active collaborators in helping the creation and collaboration, but not co-optation, of community, societal, and institutional memory. So I think those are my personal principles, but thank God I'm able to enact them in the institution, and to really be, and to create the kind of environment, specifically talking about, but I'm talking about the reading room, I'm talking about everything, the way we collaborate with donors to create, to donate collections, the way we connect with professors to do course teachings, the way we connect with, colleagues and collaborators externally to do programs off and off campus, course sessions. It needs to be done with a true eye of self-awareness about how you show up in the space and your multiple identities. I'm proud to bring myself, I can be myself, my whole self as a Black Southern woman. But I'm going to say a phrase we know in our community, all skin folk ain't kinfolk. So I have to be cognizant and aware of how I show up, that I don't perpetuate the same harm on other Black and brown and queer and disabled, just anybody, right? But also, I want people coming into the space, again, when I talk about accessibility and explanation, but to feel able to feel the range of emotions and authenticity. First of all, the guidance to, again, if you haven't used archival material, and we do have an eye towards long-term preservation, but people can still touch and handle. We say, I just make sure I wash my hands first, that there are no oils. Just a little explanation goes a long way, so people aren't made to feel marginalized. And again, to make sure they know I'm doing those same practices in the space, but that they can feel the range of emotions. And we have a lot of joy, a lot of kikiing, a lot of laughter, a lot of tears, but that might be atypical of other spaces and archives, where sometimes it's like the idea of quiet. You stay to yourself. We do a lot of yapping, surprise, surprise. But there's the opportunity to have an experience with the materials, but with the people. And we were talking about that earlier. You get to encounter Sister Audrey, but you get to encounter Sister Cole, Janetta Cole, but maybe an alumna you don't know. And to see the connections that people feel. We've had tears, we've had exclamations, we've had joy, we've had outrage, and to have the space to talk and operate, and that we can work through these things communally. So it's more than just, okay, you can come, look at these boxes, it's like creating community in the space throughout each of those processes, if that makes sense. And that's what I see the Black feminist archival practice as a whole, is just a way we kind of, we collectively, that we construct not only the space, but construct how we build community and how we do the work together.
Sort of building on that, Yusuf, a couple of times you've talked about zines or your practice, you've used the word vulnerability, that it's like a vulnerable form or format. And you've also talked about, it seems really important to you, that these zines are transmitted hand to hand. I want you to sort of put those two things together. That's a very like beautiful, sensitive reading about what printed matter can do in terms of tapping into a set of feelings, but also a set of embodied relationships. I give this to you, and you go and you spend time with it. That was a little bit of an explanation. I think my question really is, why are you so committed to the printed form as anchoring these sets of relations?
Well, just to speak briefly about the times that we are living in, and thinking about the formation of AI, and thinking about the digital imprint on the world today, thinking about digital transmitting of information, I'm very concerned with the print form and the tangibility of material as we know it today, that not necessarily that it would be lost, but the feeling would be lost. And it's very concerning to me. One of the things that I always prioritized when I was given access to so many archives, so many collections, is the fact that I always would let the archivist know that I want to come in and touch the material, because it possesses a deep-rooted spirituality that's connected to the evidence. Almost like I like to say, it's evidence that something has been there, and to be able to allow for tangibility, also, and vulnerability in that aspect, leaves no room or barrier for me or the viewer, the people who is experiencing the work. There's not a layer of a barrier, and they're able to facilitate and process the emotions on what's taking place in real time. And I think that has always been something that I have always wanted to prioritize, which then I've always been asked the question of, how do I look at accessibility, and what does accessibility look like to me? And one of the questions that I'm always presented with is, on numerous occasions throughout different discussions that I've had, was how do you view accessibility, and what do you think about keeping that same understanding of tangibility, but also thinking about new ways of accessibility, i.e. Sharing PDFs. It's never been something that, it's never been a way on how I facilitated work. Even if someone sends me a PDF, I don't engage with it as much, because it almost feels like there's no soul there. And I need transparency between me and the information. And if it takes me to travel to see something, I'll do it. And look for ways on how to frame the work that I'm dealing with in a way in which, for those who may not have the access to these collections or institutions or archives, for me to then put it in a form in which they then do have access, which is through the zine. And I was able to do that on so many occasions through Black Mass, where I was able to deal with information that's been locked away. Larry Neal, his papers, I went through his papers in 2019 at Schaumburg, and at the time they will only allow you 2 boxes at a time. And Cheryl, who was the archivist there during that time, I convinced her to let me pull 4 boxes. And we built a very nice relationship, and the first time she let me pull the 2 boxes, and then she would let me do 4, 2 on the table and 2 in the cart. And I went through all of Larry's papers, and it was this one document that he had. I like to say this document was completed. They have it labeled as incomplete. I think it was completed. The reason why I think it's completed is because I think that, it died before he published it, but the reason why I believe it was complete is because I felt like it set out for what it was supposed to do. and I encountered it. And the information that he was speaking about it was called the Larry Noe was writing this document. It was called the Ra's Black Consciousness. It was a very beautiful document, and I was able to do some scans of this, and this information was able to be distributed in this and through the format of the zine, excerpts of it at least, and it was just instances like that where I always think about how these things made me feel when I encountered it for the first time, or even sometimes the second time, that it would go against everything that I believe in, to then create a barrier that would not allow other people to experience it, even if it's not in the way that I'm experiencing it, but at least, or feeling, but at least to feel it as from a tangible aspect. And that's why I had said during my initial introduction that when thinking about accessibility, I don't always get everything right, and I'm still thinking about different modes of conveying the idea of accessibility. And you know, one of the things that I recently did, like I said, was the radical publishing. That was my idea of thinking about, okay, well, I can distribute these box sets to community-based libraries with accessibility to the public, where people can come off who do not have academic credits or letters of recommendations, or institutional connections. And I feel like I've built the connection so that I can give people the access to the information, me being the proxy, and via me, and now it could be put back into the hands of the people. Because I'll say this lastly, and we said this during our closed door today, that this information is not even supposed to be in locked away in institutions from the beginning. So technically, it don't even belong to them. So it's like, you're just holding it for right now. We'll find a way to get it out of there.
I think a lot of us in the room probably identify with the burnout, especially when you're 1 or 2 or 3 people managing a project. And I think a lot of times burnout is, of course it's because it's administrative overload and things, but there's also the kind of burnout that comes with paving the way that you haven't seen paved before, and trying to continually produce something that you haven't quite yet seen in the world. And I wonder if we can twist that a little bit to be a point of discovery for you, for all of the ways that it has been difficult and naughty and also beautiful and joyful to do Cassandra. I'm curious about what other models of thinking or writing or being in conversation or publishing do you sort of draw inspiration from, and that help you keep Cassandra going even when you try to quit it?
So things to pull from, for sure. I think other models to pull from, Oh, you just said so much. I feel like in this way, I hate being the first. You know what I mean? I think that's real for most of us. Like that Black excellence matrix is the matrix. Is that Harriet who wrote the Matrix too? Doesn't the Black woman wrote that Terminator and the Matrix? So that feels real, like the time traveling of it, where I don't think we're just not allowed to live and be alive. You know what I mean? And so in so many ways, like, yeah, there's a time traveling aspect that, like, for the show I just opened a show in Shanghai that was I'm gonna say I curated it, because fuck that, you know what I mean? But I had to give a co-curator credit to the director of a museum, right? It's like these kinds of things where I've worked so often with directors of museums. In this short career of Cassandra, we've had 7 museum shows. Each show has a reading room. I think I'm the first and only Black woman to have 2 separate, like I had the whole floor of the Whitney Biennial, and I had a video installation. So in so many ways, it's like I see at a policy level of inclusion, because I have this access since the last maybe 10 years to directors of major arts organizations and museums, the way that, like these conversations end up becoming programs or becoming grants or becoming, and then of course that model is erased as, I'm erased as a source or an origin. So it's really hard for me to even point to my models because I feel then that I'm giving them to a system, or I'm giving them up again to authorlessness. And then I think there's ways where, like, yeah, like as especially as the intensity of holding Black feminist-led space is one where leadership, really gets, you have to deal constantly with what it means to internalize absolute degradation, whether that's sort of valued as self-sacrifice or pitied as some kind of self-annihilation, right? And so then again, too, it's very hard to point to some sources, right? Like, so for many forms of communication in a realistic level, Mammy, Jezebel, and Sapphire, still, to this day. Those are models that are absolutely affluent emotionally. The mechanisms of them are very held in situ. And so in a lot of ways, right, when I fight, when I freeze, when I fawn, I think constantly of Mammy, Jezebel, and Sapphire, and they become methodologies and models. Then there are, like, these specific Black women's biographies, right? Like this show, for the show in Shanghai, I needed Shirley Du Bois with me to think through that picture of Mao and DB, WDB, WEBD, WEB. So I needed Shirley, I needed Shirley's operas, I needed Shirley's advocacy, I needed Shirley's intergenerational motivations, and I needed to see Shirley bringing Stokely Carmichael to a 90-something-year-old Du Bois's feet. You know what I mean? I needed to see through the charismatic leader and the double consciousness into the actual women around him. I needed to see Grace Lee Boggs. I needed to see a non-Black woman who married into Black radicality, right? And what that gave her for social stability, or for intellectual stability that it did not give her in terms of material stability, right? I needed to see Suzanne Césaire. Like, I needed to think about her burning her papers, so that she wouldn't be seen again in connection to surrealism. A politician's wife, shaking hands with Michelle Obama at 52 Walker, right? Like these kinds of like that, yeah. So yeah, I needed to see Amy Ashwood Garvey, and think about what it is to be a generous host, even when your man is cheating on you with every third woman you bring into the space. I needed to feel like, like so many of these people before, all of them are methodologies, all of them are origins, all of them are ways of keeping going, all of them are ways of coping. Aunt Jemima got me through 2020. I wouldn't have been able to survive the betrayal of seeing the Black Lives Matter movement turn into a music video, right? Without understanding that Aunt Jemima is a technology for care that, had to resign in 2020, you know what I mean? So in that way, it's like the burnout is so real, but I know I'm still moving. And I know there's been much movement beyond and through death, before me. There's a social death that, that's always walking before all of us. I think that's something about being global that I'm really interested in. Like, what does it mean in the diaspora? It means so often that your dead ancestors precede you, and that images constructed in order to control you, you step into them, right? And every, especially for Black women, we're always chocolate, we're always sugar, we're always, something to be eaten by others. We step into spaces where people are mimicking us, are sounding like, or trying to, or costuming, skin walking. Like, we step into these spaces. We step into a kind of fetishism that's almost always labeled success. We step into a miscegenation, like a really, like, embodied in our bodies, right, are these social policies that colonialism is bred through. So we have texturism, we have colorism, we have, cultural betrayal as a trauma theory, which Jennifer Gomez super invested in right now. Something you brought up earlier today that I was thinking about with Gomez is dream storming. So, like, in so many ways, I don't think there's one source that keeps me going, but it is maybe these concepts of, like, how are we using our dreams, our out-of-body experiences, our intuitions, how are we calling ancestors in, but then also how are we rejecting ancestors that have hurt us, people and social policies that restrict us in our very close relationships, right? Like, most femme bodies are abused by the same people that love them. And so there's always that kind of tricky thing of how do you stand next to something that if it can't consume you, will hate you, or exclude you. And in that way, yeah, there are countless. It's sad because there are countless people I look to.
Yeah, I think a lot of this year of the Black Embodiments Studio and central to convening these people has been really rooted in my paranoia of we're all constantly standing next to the person who hates us and that we pay taxes to. To then mow us down. And I've really been thinking about these small scale printed matter ways and these reading rooms as ways that as methodologies of keeping going. I like that phrase. I'm really gonna kind of hold on to that. I wanna open it up to the room. You've had your time to think, to offer questions. We have a microphone. You can use the microphone or shout out your question and I'll repeat it into the mic so that everybody can hear. So you could just raise your hand and we'll see what decision we make.
Okay. Hello. My name is Michaela. It is very, very nice to, I'm super inspired. I guess my question, as somebody who went to HBCU and worked in the archives there, and I definitely, when working with the tangible material, felt like a lot of the recipes are being lost in producing and cataloging archives, especially for people in like students. And so my question are just to keep the recipes going, what manuals and inspiration and things I should look at to keep this work going, but on an institution, because I love what you guys were talking about, accessibility. And for me to be, graduated from there, but still wanting to do the work to keep the work going, I just wanted to know, what are the things that inspire you and the things that I should be reading and doing and practicing being removed from an institution and not having that ground my work.
Zakia, can we make you answer? Amari wants you to answer.
I'm sorry, but that's your bag.
Get on the program. No, I agree. I was going to be nosy and say, do you mind saying which HBCU you went to?
I went to Dillon.
Okay, Dillon in the house. Yes. I cede the floor to my sister of the Stacks, Dr. Collier. Well, okay, I will just shore up what you're probably going to say in just very briefly, that I'm glad you're here, because the first point is to make sure to connect with all these wonderful people here. So we are resources that want to connect with you and to either connect you to, some promising practices, whether for preservation, collecting. So I just wanted to say that, but please, yes, my sister.
Hello, everyone. As you can see, I am not on the panel, but I know these people. I would say, to echo Holly, definitely being in conversation with Black archivists, curators, memory workers broadly. And I'm gonna pull up a QR code in a little second to get you connected with the Black memory workers group that I steward. I think that ways to continue the work, another wonderful archivist down here, Jehoida, has a wonderful guide called the Legacy Management Resource Portal. Yep. That is something that I refer people to all the time for maintaining collections outside of institutions. There are wonderful videos associated with what to do with your digital archives, your physical archives. If you want to work with institutions, how to do that in ways that you can protect yourself and do so ethically. Yeah, I would say just get to know us and read Black women writers.
And while you pass the mic to the next person, I'll just say that was Zakia Collier, who does a lot of things, one of the things being the Black memory workers. And Zakia cited Jehoida Calvin, who also does a lot of things. And so, if, just Googleable names, I guess.
That's a great resource. Hello, my name is Leilani Lewis. I'm a co-founder of a group called Black Women Write Seattle. We meet on Sundays. We have a landing page. Please visit it. I don't disclose the meeting place, but we meet the last Sunday of the month here in Seattle. We're a dope group. It's about 150 of us. We have amazing meetings. please check us out. Anyways, I guess we foster a group of folks who are writing the history of now, or writing their stories. They're poets, they're authors, they're people who write everything from horror and short story to romance and some real nasty stuff. I can't get into that. But what we're doing now is writing it now. And I really want to make sure that we're going to use this resource about the archive. But people are thinking about, like, you know, they're self-publishing, or they want to get into publishing. Our mission is about helping people on their path toward publication. So how does this fit into this idea? Like, you're collecting books, I just simplified this. What you're talking about is far, far more vast than collecting. When we're thinking about physical media and what you're working with, and I'm talking to writers, and we are talking in dialogue with writers about self-publishing, about actually printed media, things that can degrade over time. What advice or what do you have to say for writers now about getting published, writing, printing their own works?
My advice is what I've always said to people who ask a similar question. And I say this with love, to just do it yourself. I think to wait for someone to publish it, or to trying to look for the correct word to be as easy as possible. But I'm giving advice that was kind of similar to how I was thinking about when I wanted to put Black Mass into motion. Earlier, there were times where I wanted to produce material, and I felt like I didn't have a home for the material that I wanted to produce. And I remember Steve Cannon telling me, just do it yourself. And Black Mass, I just did it, I did it myself. Very little money. And it started out, very small, and it expanded, but I just didn't wait. I did it myself, and it was let into the hands and to the communities that it was meant to circulate in. So I would say to just don't wait, just you to do it yourself.
Yeah, so and the jet lag just kicked, so I'm like, ooh, everything got bright and loud real quick. I don't know why. I was like, this is crazy. But definitely exactly what Yusuf just said, do it, just do it. But also I feel like it's really important to take a step in what you were just asking and define a couple of things, like what is it to be a writer, a journalist, an artist? What's that primary mark? And what is its like imagined utility? And then what is like the utility that you desire for it? Like, I don't think everything has to be published, you know what I mean? I don't think there's a race towards publication. Like, a lot of people need journals that are archived well after they leave this earth. A lot of people don't need to be published, like a lot of people don't need to self-publish also, right? Like, every book fair, we do the zine fairs, like, and I've been in the zine tent. The first 6-7 years in the zine tent, so many the amount of white girl zines, and I call them this, right? Where it's like, every boy I've ever kissed. I don't give a single fuck. And this is why it's so important. And I teach a lot in Europe, right? So when I teach about the press and press work, people are like, oh, but can you tell the students why it's important to self-publish? I won't tell everyone that it's important to self-publish. That is exactly why we have the podcast that we have now. Not everybody needs a platform. Not everybody needs a mic. Why do you want it? What do you want it for? What is it? You know what I mean? Like, let's think about all media. I teach time-based media. I just finished teaching time-based media in Hamburg, and it's such a funny term, right? Time-based media, because all media is time-based in so many ways. So I feel like when you think about that mark, like, we've been having these questions around longevity, around performativity, around accessibility. What's the mark? What is it for? Ask that question real quick. Ask a couple people that question. Ask a larger amount of people that question. take your time. Not everyone is an artist. Not everyone has to be an artist. Some people are journalists. Some people are researchers. Some people are recorders. Some people are mirrors. Not everybody has to do this rush to publish. Not everybody's producing anything, right? In many ways, like people are like, oh, you're a writer, right? I spent 12 years publishing other people's writings that other white people, not just white people, but other people had already published. I was a bootlegger. I wasn't a publisher, you know what I mean? But the press work that needed to be done in that moment was bootlegging. So that, yeah, it's like, are you attaching to a value that's already circulating? Are you subverting a value that's already circulating? If you are, maybe you need to be going to Taschen in force. Maybe you need to be going to Knopf in force. Maybe you need to be at banging down university libraries. Maybe you need to be at Duke every day picketing and being like, y'all need to publish us. Y'all need to publish us. Y'all need to publish us. Toni Cade Bambara, Audre Lorde, all these women had community. They forced community. Toni Morrison. Big boss, you know what I'm saying? This is Tony Montana. She's not, Howardina Pindell, not publishing everybody. Octavia Butler has so many letters in her archive where she's dealing with the absolute betrayal, right, of being rejected by all those women, all those black women in New York. Like Toni Morrison writes, letter to Octavia Butler, we don't need black science fiction. Race is a fiction, right? Like, what are you doing, girl? Right? You know what I mean? Like, so there's so many ways where, like, make your mark. Your mark will be found by the people who need your mark. As long as you make it, as long as it's honest, as long as you're making it for what it's for. Zora Neale Hurston's grave was found by Alice Walker, covered in weeds, and sunk down deep. Hambone, somebody brought up Hambone. I think, these, plays that are produced by Zora Neale Hurston that, Heyday, whatever, like it's not guaranteed that Beyonce won't die penniless, right? It's not guaranteed that she won't be absorbed as a fascist icon in the next 10 minutes, right? And then who's gonna need that mark? Who's gonna need that mark? Who needs Pharrell's mark? I don't also. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so it's like, but there it is, spread everywhere, right? Like, it's the L and the, you can't miss it. So if you make your mark and it's true, people will find it. And the work of the press is not always it's not always publishing. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Hey. My name is Dr. Aderia Johnson. I am a Spelman alum, class of 2015. Hey, but I'm also the associate curator at the Museum of Pop Culture. So, hey, y'all come see the museum.
And
Erica. Yes, Erica. We having hey, I'm gonna see you. Hey, y'all. So I wanted to ask about language. A lot of times when I'm thinking about when I curate my shows, specifically like our Black shows, it's really about educating folks about our history and our culture, but I noticed that I've been paying a lot of attention to language, so I'll have definition and terms and things like that. And initially when I started working at the museum, I worked in the collections department and helping build the hip hop archive. And so I'm curious about, have you all thought about language in the ways of Black printed materials and the ways that we're talking? And I'm in this space also about language just because the cultural appropriation of like Gen Z language and all this other stuff and knowing it's AAVE/Ebonics. So again, I'm just curious to know, like, what do you all think about in regards of preserving language and what is the practice of writing about Black language and how does that come up in your work?
Can I ask Amari to answer that? Yes. Yes, because I think there's a good connection here because you have taken on a project of helping people develop a language around Black art, and so that's why you have to respond.
This is payback? Are y'all in cahoots? Language. Okay, let me figure this out. Something that I wanted to say earlier about Toni Cade Bambara is that she said learning can happen anywhere. And so the project that Kemi is referring to is called Black Art History 101, and it's a series of teach-ins that are designed to make art history more relevant, engaging, and accessible. And so the way that I've sort of designed each program is that we'll do some close looking exercises. I'll introduce some terms. I'll maybe give like a little bit of information about the artists and the relationships that the work have to one another. But I think the motivation behind the series is art history does have a social function. It can have a social function. And you shouldn't have to access it through academia. You shouldn't have to be an art history major. And how can we collapse the hierarchies in knowledge and learning so that everybody's able to talk about art? Kiara, are you in the audience? Is Kiara here? Kiara's not here. Also, a person in our cohort who is thinking about everyday people thinking and talk about Black visual culture and Black material culture. I don't know if that answers your question, girl, but you know.
Oh, here we have
Jess.
an answer. I feel like this is like game show style. Come on down. Oh, you're asking a question. Okay.
You're right, Lauren. But later. I also have a question about language, but it's maybe pointed in a different direction, which is to say that today we've been using a lot of terms, right? And I want to ask a question about maybe some of our presumptions about those terms, mainly community. We've been using that word in opposition to institution, and I also think there are many presumptions to unpack about how we define that too. But I want to know how you all define community, like who are the people implicated in that term for you? Because there are also people that we do not want to be in cipher with, and it's very, the easy thing is to kind of name the apparatuses of white supremacy as they show up, as the obvious entities that we are not in cipher with, but I would love to hear you get specific about who you imagine yourself to be, the community that you work with, embed yourself with, form coalitions with, and then maybe as an aside, how those people inform different questions that propel your work in other directions. Thank you.
Nice, a really concise response is necessary for time.
So,
I don't believe in community.
We probably could have figured that out.
I'm
That's
done
not
with
the jet
it.
lag.
I've always said that community look different for everybody. Community do not look the same for everybody. But to answer that question, I'm going to use someone else's answer that I've always thought was a nice way to answer that question. My community, I'll use the term that Arthur Jafer used. He said that he's talking to Black people, white people are just listening in. And I subscribe to that. Yeah, I would, yeah.
Sure. Say your name and your project.
So, hi everyone, my name's Theophina, and I run a Black independent magazine for Black revolutionary thinkers and writers called Onyx Magazine. And we have taken community to mean a system or a relation in which we are caring for one another consistently, and we also share a world-building vision politically. So when those two factors are aligned, that is delineating community. Community can't be someone who is building a world that is consistent with the oppression of the world that you need to be free within. And so anybody who you are not also in consistent care with is kinfolk. So there's a sort of relational distinction, and that is also taken from Black spaces. Like, I grew up in a Black Pentecostal church, so community was an act of like care that surpassed like, or you didn't like this auntie or the sister that always served you, but consistently you were around her house, so there was care being exchanged. So yeah, care and world-building vision.
Can I close out with the last question? So I want to have another one. My question is for Candace, actually. So the Cassandra Press that you passed around today, it's a very simple question. The photo of the boys on the cover, where was that actually taken? I've never saw the photo before.
The photo on the cover?
Yes.
The photo on the cover is a political propaganda photo that was taken in China on Du Bois's second trip there in 1963. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen the photo before. Thank you.
Yeah.
We learn from each
It's
other in real time.
W.B. Du Bois shaking hands with Mao Zedong.
I like
Thank you.
that definition of community, Theophina, and I think I will just say that that's the community. That's the definition that we are all adopting in different kinds of ways, and that the printed matter that we're all dealing with, and we have loving relationships to that matter, and we have antagonistic relationships to that matter, but that matter is precisely the material that's bringing us into proximity with people and into intellectual gathering. Somebody earlier said intellectual gathering. I'm thinking about that a lot. There are so many people that was you? She said, claim it. And so I appreciate the question about what do we mean when we say community, because I think a lot of us experience that word as an intuition and a sort of like, you know it when you see it kind of thing, and that we're all people on the stage and right here and perhaps in the room who materialize that community when we, press the new edition or bring somebody into the archive or bring somebody to let them sit down and read. And so it's very much a practice. It has to be a practice. Otherwise, it's hoarding and narcissism. And so I really have appreciated our time together. We're only halfway through. We have more time tomorrow. Sorry to the people who aren't going to be able to be there in the room tomorrow. Just very grateful to be in community with you all and then to be in conversation with everybody in the room. And if you want to extend the conversation, we are having a zine making workshop tomorrow called Visionary Futures, Zines as Action, at the Jacob Lawrence Gallery, led by multiple people in the room here tonight who you've heard from and you've seen. And that's from 10 a.m. to noon in the Jacob Lawrence Gallery right here on campus. You can come up to me and ask for more details. I think it's on our Instagram at Black Embodiments as well. So find somebody in the room if that's something you want to attend in the morning. That's another point to continue this conversation. And I just want to thank everybody in the room for being here with us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Black Mass is available via.
Wait, in closing, you said.